The Princess and the Human, Chapter 35, that would be all from my part. Unless you have anything to add, Lady Githay? Githay suppressed a sigh as the two of them kept walking through the hallways. Lord Jarkina, I am by no means here to undermine your authority, she insisted to the head physician of the Kalhanar hospital. Her Highness simply wishes that the transport of her brother happens without any trouble. I am more than sufficient to ensure that, the head physician retorted. Tell her that. I am simply following her orders. Or do you want me to ignore them? Oh, of course not. I'm just saying that sending 2 doctors of, at least comparable qualifications are excessive. Githay once again didn't let her feelings show. She knew Dr. Jarkina was fully aware that their qualifications were more than just comparable. But as the royal physician, she technically outranked him despite her being only a baroness. Most nobles, especially those from older clans, usually didn't like that. Granted, she didn't know for sure if that was really what had ticked him off. She might have told him otherwise, but the fact that she was here insinuated that Her Highness didn't fully trust his abilities. Maybe she should have answered in a less confrontational manner. I agree, it is a bit much. But please, don't understand this as her mistrusting you. She is simply worried about her brother. I'd wish she would treat her own health with the same level of care. But as long as I am her subordinate, all I can do is give her my advice. If she insists on not following it, there is nothing I can do, and to be completely honest, she has been under a lot of stress lately, so don't hold it against her. A sigh from Jarkina was the answer. I guess you are right. Besides, it might not be that excessive after all. Since we are approaching the long rain, the weather is a bit unstable. The shuttle will be forced to fly slower, so in the worst case, it might take us an entire day to reach Vi-Minar. We can take turns in monitoring his condition. A good idea. Oh, first ones, get a room you two. The sudden call from the sickbed reminded the two that they weren't alone. They had been walking alongside the assistants who were currently in the process of transporting the young prince to the landing platform. Apparently, as the discussion had grown a bit heated, both of them had forgotten about their surroundings. I apologize, Your Highness, Jarkina said with a bow. The behavior I displayed was highly unprofessional. Likewise, Githay added. I am not familiar with the phrase you used though. So I assume it's from Nadine, and maybe, figured, Githay chuckled. Maybe she should one day ask the small alien what some of her more curious idioms meant. Say, Your Highness, you wouldn't happen to know what the request to get a room is supposed to convey? No. Nadine said she'd explain it when I'm older. When he was older? Why would one's age be a relevant factor in that? Well, that was a topic for a different day. For now, they had reached the ambulance shuttle. While the assistants carried the injured prince inside, Githay and Jarkina did one final check that they had everything. Kirteen's injuries were almost entirely external, so they didn't need many monitoring devices. The most important things were bandages, hardening agents, and larcoresin, in case a new tear opened in his shell. I guess the silver lining is that he only touched Nadine with his front side. Thanks to that, he can at least more or less safely lie on his back. Let's hope we don't get caught in a storm. There shouldn't be one according to the forecast, but flying to the other side of the planet was a long journey. The flight was mostly uneventful up until around 10 Invis after the start. Kirteen had fallen asleep a while ago when the datapad of the head physician gave off a message sound. Something important? Githay asked, more for the sake of small talk than actual interest. Lab report, her colleague murmured. Her Highness managed to acquire a sample of the unknown substance that put the prince in this situation. Ah, right, that story, Githay thought. Though I wasn't aware she sent in a sample of Nadine's sweat. Well, I wanted to do a thorough analysis myself, so I won't complain. Could you send me the report later? Sure. Okay, let's see. Water-based solution, containing traces of ammonia. Potassium, sodium chloride, something that is unknown but potentially toxic, a variety of salts. What in the world is that concoction? Githey did her best not to chuckle at that remark. What her colleague would say if he knew the true origin of this. Just what were they trying to achieve with this? He mumbled as he kept reading. Or was it maybe a byproduct? But even then, what was the HM? What by the first ones? The sudden outcry made Githey perk up. That reaction after already going through the previous contents. Was there something Nadine hadn't told her? What does it say? She carefully asked. The solution contains an insane variety of microbes. All of them unknown. A plethora of bacteria, viruses, and something uncategorized, pathogenic, questioned, shocked by what she had just heard. It wasn't that rare that a species had one or two types of symbiotic microbes in their body, but this amount, and what was the unidentifiable thing? Probably not. I mean, His Highness is fine, right? I will definitely give this to the Vi-Minar hospital, but we examined His Highness often and thoroughly. We would have noticed if he had shown any symptoms. That was true. Maybe it didn't affect them because they were used to Nadine's organism, which was so fundamentally different from the Vannery. Still, she needed to look into this, just to be sure. They reached the planet's capital, the great city of Vi-Minar, after a bit under a day. Sleeping in the shuttle hadn't exactly offered the most satisfying rest, but the prince's well-being was more important at the moment. After Kirteen had safely reached his new hospital room, Jarkina announced that he would stay for a few days to make sure everything went over smoothly. Githey, on the other hand, went back immediately to not be absent from the palace for too long. The ride home was expected to go faster because there was no need to fly as carefully as before. Despite being tired, Githey did her best to stay awake so as to not mess up her sleep cycle. But apparently, she had dozed off for a moment as the pilot's voice tore her out of her stupor. "Milady, MH? What, it's now the 17th Inva in Kalhanar. You wanted me to tell you, yes, thank you. If they went by schedule, which was to be expected, the negotiations should have a break right now." As Githey issued a call to the Star Palace, the servant in charge informed her that Her Highness was indeed free at the moment, and after a short waiting period, the princess's face appeared on the screen. "Doctor," she greeted. "Is there an issue?" "Not so far, Your Highness. I merely wanted to inform you that your brother's transport went over without any problems." "That's good to hear. Do you know when you will return?" "Probably not until tonight. You will likely be already in bed by then." "But I also called for another reason." "How are your headaches?" With a worried expression, the princess took a long pause before answering. "In all honesty, it's been getting worse. During yesterday's negotiations, I did exactly what I wanted to prevent from happening. And I don't feel like the medicine is working." "No effect?" Sure, she had given the princess a weaker version of the medicine, but there still should have been a noticeable improvement. Maybe the headaches weren't from the stress. But what then? Headaches were unfortunately a symptom that could have a plethora of causes. "Did you notice anything else?" I don't think so. That wasn't helpful. Can you cancel the talks for the rest of the day?" "Actually, today aren't any. Lady Kikla proposed a day off so I could rest." Githey needed a moment to process what she just heard. "The Taistri ambassador?" "Yes. Your condition is so bad that even the Taistri ambassador proposed a break?" "Yes." "Then I hope you are taking it. Treat yourself with care. If it gets worse, don't hesitate to call for another doctor. I don't know how long exactly the rest of the flight will take, but if you're still awake when I come back, I will take a closer look. If not, come to me first thing in the morning." The sun had long disappeared when Githey finally reached the Star Palace. Tired from the long flight, she entered through the side entrance and made her way to the west wing. While the lights in the corridor were still on, not a single servant was in sight around the princess's room. This could only mean Her Highness had already gone to sleep. There was also no one waiting for her. Relieved that it at least hadn't gotten worse, and glad that the princess had gone to bed early for once, Githey entered her office, and through it her private chambers. Her tiredness won as soon as she laid down and she fell asleep. She didn't know how long she had been sleeping. All she knew was that a loud and obnoxious beeping noise made her wake up. Why was her alarm clock going off? It was still the middle of the night. No, this wasn't her alarm clock. This was the emergency alert. Great, so it wasn't enough for Prince Kirtin to annoy her during the day, now he even had to rob her of her night's rest. And the worst part? To make sure she wouldn't miss it, she had made it so the alarm wouldn't stop on its own. She actually had to get up and open the door to turn it off. Wait, Kirtin was at the hospital. In an instant, she was fully awake and practically jumped out of her bed. Whoever this was, if they pressed the emergency button in the middle of the night. It was important. She was just about to leave her bedroom when suddenly, she froze upon hearing some sort of impact, so violent that it made the floor vibrate. What by the first ones was that, a second impact made her overcome the moment of shock. She ran through her small living room, but her left foot got caught on the doorstep. She stumbled into her office and fell to the ground, which was luckily cushioned by the soft carpet. Just as she pulled up her head and looked towards the entrance, the third impact hit. With the sound of metal failing its duty, the lock got ripped out of the doorframe. The door burst open, crashing into the adjacent wall with so much force that the upper hinge broke apart. In the corridor, there stood Nadine, 1 foot raised. The door and lock had been reinforced, just like all doors in the palace. Had she seriously just kicked it open, but before Githey could voice her bafflement, she noticed the princess's unconscious body draped over the small alien's shoulder.